Yes, guys, welcome back to SFeatleyTV, and we're here for the Checkered Flag Show, your weekly F1 show. Well, it depends how things go. But we've got. I'll just put that on silent for a minute. We've got Adam back from the DNF1 Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Stephen. Hi, everyone. And it looked like we had a bit of a interruption to the intro there. Certainly got a lot going on in the background. But it's good to be back. And how you been?
Yeah, I've been great. I'd say great. I mean, obviously, I'm an Arsenal fan, so it lasted to the start of the season, and it all went downhill from that point.
The choir on that one, mate.
Yes, well, we're not here to talk about Arsenal. Thank God for that. We're here to talk about F1, your weekly news show, and there's a lot to get through. And I wanted to start, Adam, because obviously we've had numerous shows since, and we haven't had a show with you since that British Grand Prix at Silverstone, where we had the accident of Max, which probably looked inevitable at some point towards the championship between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. And I wanted to get your opinion on the matter. I saw your video, and I want to just explain to us viewers about your side, how you saw it.
Oh, wow. So I think if I remember rightly in the podcast that I did on my channel, DNF1, I said at the time that I felt the penalty was fair under the circumstances. And I think you have to be careful not to assess an incident based on the outcome. It's very tempting to do that.
Yeah.
And, for what it was on its merits, I felt the time penalty was a fair one to Lewis. And, it's one of those situations where I don't think you can apportion 100% of the blame to Lewis Hamilton in particular, nor can you say that Max Verstappen didn't give Lewis enough room. He gave him probably just enough, but it does leave itself with little margin for error. So I think upon reflection of it, I think both drivers probably, when the dust had settled and everybody had calmed down, probably felt that perhaps they'd wish they'd probably took it a little bit less aggressive, I suppose, is the right way to put it. That all being said, I think a lot of people were probably disappointed, or perhaps if they're not Lewis Hamilton fans, they were disappointed because of the fact that Lewis was still able to, take the penalty and go on to eventually win the race. And of course, you have to hold your hand up and say, well done, Lewis. Well done, Mercedes. It was an incredible comeback. So, it's just one of those, unfortunately for Red Bull and Verstappen, they didn't exactly take it on the chin in the way that I think people would have wanted them to. They were, to a degree, understandably frustrated. But I think the best thing that we can do from that is probably just move on. And now that we've had the summer break, hopefully that will ease tensions a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up at this weekend's race at Spa. Something that happens between these two, as I think, as you said, Stephen, it was bound to happen eventually. I think we'd had a few close calls and near misses. And now that it has, I think the gloves are well and truly off, and we're going to see a fantastic second half of the season. Hopefully, what happens off the track between the two teams and drivers is the least, the part that we don't talk about much often, or it doesn't repeat what we saw at Silverstone. I think a lot of people would agree, whilst Red Bull were understandably angry, some of the comments that were made by them in particular, and and a lot of the comments that were made by some people who I don't consider to be Formula One fans were well out of the line. So hopefully we can just move forward and enjoy what hopes to be an exciting second half to the season.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the comments there. I mean, even I saw, because obviously there's one knows I'm a massive Lewis Hamilton fan. So obviously still, I spent probably a lot of those 2 weeks fighting sort of Hamilton's corner to say it's not completely his fault. And so obviously some of the comments that they've come out and said that they're totally disgraceful and wrong. And I didn't like the way in Hungary how Red Bull was still going about it. And then and you could tell that, like, and it probably ended up that them getting no points in Hungary was probably more down to them focusing on the incident rather than focusing on themselves and focusing on the weekend. And for me, that's why I say that their mentality, I don't think, is as strong as Mercedes. Mercedes have got that mentality of no matter how big bad probably things get during a weekend, they just move on to the next one and aim to do better to the next one. Whereas Red Bulls just seem to carry it on and always have it in the back of their minds. And hopefully now, like, they've had that 3-week break. I think the 3-week break came just at the right time for them to just like calm down, settle it all down, and then go again. So, I mean, how did you see Red Bull's like response in Hungary to the whole thing? Because I didn't really like the way they responded at all.
Well, I mean, to be fair to them, Stephen, obviously they were still very angry about what happened. I think there was a lot of stuff that was miscommunicated between the parties, and you know they did point the finger at Lewis, saying that his celebrations at Silverstone were not very respectful towards Max. But at the same time, I think you have to absolve Lewis from celebrating the way that he did, because Mercedes effectively didn't tell Lewis Max's situation. And you and I, obviously knowing Lewis Hamilton as fans the way that we do, we know that Lewis Hamilton is not the sort of person that would celebrate the way that he did at Silverstone if he knew that Max was in hospital. He went on the radio straight away after the collision and said, "Is Max okay?" And they said, "Yeah, he's out of the car, he's shaken up, but he's fine." If they'd have told him he was still in hospital after he'd won the race, I'm sure Lewis's celebrations would have been a bit more subdued. So I think Mercedes probably should have come out and formally said, you know, it was our mistake. We didn't tell Lewis, and you know, perhaps our celebrations in light of what had happened weren't necessarily appropriate. But that being said,
there's been plenty of drivers before where they've had accidents, gone to hospital, and people celebrated afterwards. So.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think, as I said, I think Mercedes could have told Lewis, and I think Lewis would have still celebrated, but he wouldn't have been running around going as crazy as he was. Although it was a huge moment for him in the season. In Hungary, yeah, I can understand a bit of a sour taste from Red Bull carrying that over. Of course, they were bound to, in light of trying to get Hamilton's penalty increased and everything that went into it, which, hilarious as it was, I can understand why they did it. But it was never going to be successful to come across new evidence. And these appeals are very rarely are successful. But based on the race itself, obviously you were saying that they were focusing too much on the off-track activities rather than on-track. I think, to be fair to Red Bull, they were very unfortunate, because the reason why they hardly scored any points is because they both their cars got battered by Valtteri Bottas. And you know,
I sat there during the Grand Prix, and I'm thinking, how's they going to spin this one to say it's Lewis Hamilton's fault? And he said they had a secret communication in the briefing to say to knock him out, for Lewis to go tell him to knock him out.
Well, yeah, I mean, as all the conspiracy theorists in the world can try and come up with a plan to say that Bottas was instructed, if you like, to knock the Red Bulls in the way that he did, obviously via Lando Norris's McLaren. But Valtteri Bottas is not that kind of driver. Mercedes aren't that kind of team. And whilst they did benefit massively in the last couple of races through incidents that they played a big part in causing, not necessarily on purpose, unfortunately, that's just how Formula One goes sometimes. And Red Bull will take more pain from this, from the engine issues they'll have to face replacing the engines that they've currently got, because they're on the third power unit this weekend. So,
and it doesn't help they've had an accident in practice too with Max Verstappen as well.
Yeah, you're right. And I haven't seen what has come out from that yet. I did see it in practice, and it wasn't ideal, but considering some of the shunts that we have seen where the rear of the car has gone into the barrier from other cars, I think Max will be relatively okay. Of course, he'll be in, a sign of caution, but I think he should be fine. And hopefully they'll just get back and no further issues. I think what we don't want is this championship to be decided by what happened in Hungary and what happened in Silverstone. We want it to go down to the last race between Lewis and Max, in particular, Red Bull, Mercedes, and whoever's the best man on the day wins. I was just thinking the other point that you made, in terms of the championship itself and the mentality of the two teams. You're right to point out that Mercedes are very experienced and they know how to win championships. They've been doing so for the last 7 years. They know what they're doing. And in a situation like this, I think they're the best team in place to handle this situation and try and see it off. But Red Bull know how to win a world championship, and they dominated the early part of the 2010s, and they've been in this position themselves before. And this is the first time they've really had a car capable of winning a world championship. So, whilst it's been a while, and of course they've had a lot of hairy, heated moments in the last month or so, I think the mentality of the team and of Max Verstappen in particular. And I think we should lay praise on Max for this. His mentality has been, other than obviously being understandably angry at Silverstone, his mentality has been superb. His driving has been superb. And, I think this championship really does have legs to go to the end of the season. I just really hope that we do get that showdown finale between these two, because this has got Senna, Prost written all over it. It's almost like for the younger fans like you and me, obviously we weren't alive to see that battle. I think we are going to get hopefully the second coming of it, and I have no idea who's going to win. I honestly don't.
Yeah, I mean, Tiho, obviously, you're a Verstappen fan yourself. I mean,
No.
Well, you started watching. I mean, you started watching it this year, and but look, how do you see it from your side? How the season's going for you?
I mean, as a first-time watcher, of course, I've enjoyed every bit of it. I thought some races were, of course, a bit lackluster. Monaco, for example, but it's entertaining season for sure with the championship. Not only between Max and Lewis, but also Lando third place battle, the team,
McLaren and Ferrari.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, as a neutral fan, which I am now, it's a very good season, I would say. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, I saw that retweet you did just now of the Belgium helmet cam. I mean, that's cams we want to see, like in F1, like when you see them at eye level, and like when you see him go for a rouge as well, and when you see him go up for a rouge, and you see him like they have no idea where to turn, and they all of a sudden have to shift left. So but yeah, I feel that the way this is going, it will go to the end. Whether those penalties actually hinder Red Bull to a point that it does give Mercedes an advantage. You could say at the minute it does, but we don't know what happens in the race when they do take those penalties. So, and it'd be key to when they do take the penalties, I'd say is but yeah, I mean, obviously we got Belgium, we got the Dutch Grand Prix, which I think it might be Mercedes' advantage, but I think Verstappen will be desperate to win that and make a statement there at his home race, as much as Hamilton's made a statement at the British Grand Prix. So yeah, it's just it's wide open and you can't call it. It's just I think it's probably down to whoever's the best driver throughout the rest of the season. But knowing what I've seen from this before and seeing it do it many times at this stage of the season, I would sort of favour maybe towards Lewis, but maybe that's just me being biased. I mean, obviously the Japanese Grand Prix was, and this is the thing, Japanese Grand Prix has been cancelled, and we don't know whether there's going to be 23 races or there's going to be 22 or 21. There's talk about Qatar maybe replacing it as an option. I mean, how do you see it with the Japanese? I mean, obviously it's gutting to have the Japanese Grand Prix missed out, but do you see that being replaced at all, Adam?
I think the desire from F1 is to replace the race. There's been a lot of talk before the summer break about the race in Austin, having a double header there, so we're having 2 US Grand Prix. I don't know at the moment if that is still going to be going ahead. They have been saying for a while now that there have been provisions put in place on the COTA website that that they will have a second race. Since then, nothing has really been confirmed. Obviously, as you mentioned, Qatar has come out and said that they're ready to host a race, and they've got the track in Doha. And I know that F1 have been looking at Qatar as another potential country to host a Grand Prix. I think South Africa was thrown into the mix a while ago, but I think that's probably still a few years away. And we can't rule out the possibility that we may end up with 22 races. We may decide to chalk that one off. I think I was reading earlier that the Turkish Grand Prix is under threat once again, and this was a race that was put in place to originally replace Canada. And then it got took off, and then it got put back on again, and now it looks like it's going to be taken off again because it's Turkey's now back on the UK red list, which means that I think Mugello may end up hosting a race. So at this point in time, Stephen, I think we're going to see a lot of events on the fringes or at risk of being removed from the calendar, whereas others will be put back. And there are so many different options. So for all I know, we could be going to so many different venues towards the end of the season, Stephen. And into the situation in Japan at the moment with COVID, we just had the Olympics and, of course, the Paralympics going on. And obviously the complications that have arisen there owing to COVID-19, not just affecting people wanting to go see the games, unfortunately weren't able to, but also some of the athletes in the village. So it sucks that they can't have a race there. I think everybody loves the Japanese Grand Prix. It's one of my favorite circuits on the calendar. But it's the right call to make. And I wouldn't be surprised if we had one or two more that may not necessarily be on the calendar. Brazil, I think, is definitely one that I think will not be on the calendar. Mexico, I haven't heard anything from there. But again, in that part of the world, there could be some risk there. And so we'll have to wait and see. At the moment, it's all a bit up in the air. But I'm sure F1 are constantly having their ears to the ground and trying to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's something that is it's moving element. It's always going to be like it's like musical chairs at times when with the amount of options that are coming up, because we're not sure about any of these races, whether they're going to go ahead or not. So it's like every point. The sort of while we got the European season, it is so key to winning these like next few Grand Prix that are coming up, in terms of like how many points you gain out of them, because you might not have 23 races to be able to recover that gap. So getting the points now is probably more key than ever than it has been in previous seasons.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's important whilst, it's weird because Lewis has a slender lead at the moment, and so do Mercedes. And of course, loads of people can argue the case that they are in that position owing to some good fortune on their side, not necessarily, as I said, from results that have come from incidents where they've been able to benefit on, not necessarily cause on purpose, but at this point, you really do need to try and take that good fortune and run with it. And I think, as you said already, Lewis Hamilton will most likely be stronger in the second half of the season. He always usually is in this situation. And I think reflecting on the season so far, and as unpopular as opinion as this is, I think Lewis has a lot to improve on in this second half. I think he's made quite a few big mistakes, which are quite rare for someone of Lewis's caliber. I mean, you could look over his championship successes over the last decade and count the number of big mistakes he's made in that time on one hand and still have one or two fingers left over. So, it's been very uncharacteristic of him making some of the big mistakes. But unlike Max Verstappen, Lewis has been fortunate enough to not necessarily be punished for those mistakes through one way or another. So if Lewis can continue to do so and keep putting himself in a position where he goes to the next venue in the lead of the championship, we may end up being in a position where Red Bull and Max Verstappen will have less races to try and overhaul that because of races being cancelled by COVID. So at this point in time, I would much rather be in Lewis's position than Max Verstappen's position. That being said, I'd probably much rather be in Max's car than Lewis's. But again, it's all fine margins. So I suppose the name of the game is make sure you're ahead going into the next venue.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So I probably agree with you on that one. I do agree with the fact that Lewis Hamilton has made probably the more mistakes, but I think the expectation's more on him being a 7-time world champion, they expect him to perform at the same level, and the car maybe is not as been as it hasn't been as fast as it has been before. So he's trying to be pushing it beyond its limits, and that's where you incur mistakes. I mean, how do you see it, Tio?
Yeah, I probably agree. I mean, Hamilton does have the advantage for sure. Like Adam said, less races more likely, and more races where Lewis goes into the race as the leader of the championship, and which is beneficial to him and not Verstappen. I mean, if yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add. It's just what Adam said. Yeah, I agree that it's a beneficial position for Lewis, and Verstappen can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and I agree totally. I think now it's this. It could also come down to whoever makes the least mistakes during the season as well. I think also Mercedes have probably made their own mistakes as well. I mean, Hungary just is like one of the catalogue of errors. You probably could catch me like screaming at the TV. What like when he's coming around and everyone else is pitted and he's the only one taking the grid on. What?
Yeah, no.
I can imagine him just looking around and he's like, "Where is everyone?"
Well, that
Right.
was, I mean, that was definitely an error that I think, yeah, definitely more on Mercedes. I remember watching back the team radio, and a lot of the drivers kind of made the calls on their own. But that being said, Mercedes definitely shouldn't have allowed Lewis to park himself on the grid. I mean, that would have been even funnier, seeing no cars and doing a startup, which incidentally, I think the same thing probably would have occurred, but it would have been almost like you have that and like the start of a session in qualifying or practice where the drivers are all parked up at the end of the pit lane and then they just go when the green light comes on. But yeah, no, you're right. Lewis, as I said, does have to improve the second half of the season. But as I said, this is Lewis Hamilton we're talking about. And, more often than not in this kind of position, who do you want in that position? Do you want Lewis Hamilton or do you want anybody else? And there's only one other driver in the history of the sport that I could say you'd want in this position other than Lewis Hamilton, and that's Michael Schumacher. But Lewis isn't racing Michael, he's racing Max Verstappen. So for Max Verstappen, in my opinion, the only thing I would say to him is just dust yourself off. You had some bad luck, but keep doing what you're doing. I think Max has been phenomenally brilliant the first half of the season. If he's made mistakes, it's been very, very minor. And continuing all the pressure that he's been under, having a car at some races that has been the class of the field, he has been able to take advantage of that, other than the last two races where you could argue a case for Silverstone. He was a part of what happened, but Hungary was definitely very, very unfortunate. So if he can keep doing what he's doing, and given that the two cars seem to be a lot closer on performance than they were in Austria, for example, Mercedes have definitely made ground there, then Max has a good chance of winning this championship. But he just has to keep doing what he's doing and hope that the combination of Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes on this occasion will not be enough to see it through.
Yeah, that's definite, and I mean, I agree on that one. So, good. I mean, in terms of the drivers' market and obviously the transfer, sort of like the transfer news of F1. If everyone doesn't know what the drivers' market is everyone's wondering about Bottas and Russell, and I believe we were getting a decision this weekend, and we come to Spa and there's still no decision. So, this one is another one that could go either way. I mean, I get Mercedes' point wanting to keep the status quo because it's what's worked over many years, and it's worked over like since 2017, and they've won so many championships with that, and they're both happy with working together and put a young, exciting, great talent. And Lewis has obviously said that like he wants to see the young talent grow and push them push forward. but it could upset sort of the settlement of the team if he's coming in and obviously he's just as quick as Hamilton and they start fighting amongst each other. So, which could open the door for Red Bull maybe next season. This is all relevant whether they're at the front of the grid next season, so we don't actually know. But how do you see that playing out? Because that is just up in the air. Like some of these Grand Prix are still up in the air.
It's a tough one. I think everybody kind of has a different perspective and answer to this every time you ask them. I'm still of the opinion that George Russell will be in the car next season alongside Lewis Hamilton. I think whilst Mercedes have to look to the short term, which they've secured in Lewis for another couple of years, Mercedes have to look to the long term. And I think the question Mercedes have to ask themselves is, now that Ferrari have got Sainz and Leclerc and to a degree Mick Schumacher as well as their long-term future, McLaren have got Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo for at least, for a while now. Red Bull have got Max Verstappen and have now secured Perez for another year. And of course, they have drivers waiting in the wings in the future as well. Who knows what could happen with Pierre Gasly? Mercedes need to ask themselves, who do they want leading the line for them when Lewis Hamilton has gone? Do they want George Russell or do they want Valtteri Bottas? And the reality is that whilst Valtteri Bottas is very much a known entity and a safe pair of hands for the short term, compared to the other drivers that I've already mentioned, as good as Bottas is, I just feel that he has demonstrated in a pressure cooker situation that he's found himself in a few times at Mercedes, he's come up short. And Lewis Hamilton is Lewis Hamilton. We don't have to worry about that. But when you've got someone as talented as George Russell in his car, he's now scored points for Williams. He's put on qualifying performances that have been exemplary almost on a regular basis. You have to ask yourself, how much longer can you keep George Russell back before he starts to get bored of waiting and perhaps a rival picks him up, which would be the worst case scenario? And yes, of course, I can understand they don't want to disrupt the balance that they have at the moment with Hamilton and Bottas being as harmonious as it is. Lewis is not going to be around forever, and you've got to embed George in that situation. Even if you end up in a position where George decides to battle with Lewis and, comes off second best, or the two of them have a Hamilton-Alonso situation from 2007 like we saw, I doubt that will be the case. But you've got a talent like George Russell, you can't keep him back forever. So for me, I think Mercedes have to look towards George Russell. I think they have. It's about time. We've been in this position a few years now, ever since George has been in Formula One, and I think now is the time to give George that vote of confidence. In terms of when they should do it, we've been waiting on this since, I think, as far back as Silverstone. We thought we were going to get an announcement, and that hasn't happened. So I'm sure Mercedes know and are trying to think when the right time to do it is. I think they know who they want in their car. I think that has been decided. But for their sake, I think they have to announce this sooner rather than later. I think if they let this drag too long, it could not necessarily bother George Russell, but it could distract Valtteri Bottas in terms of his own future, what he does in Formula One. Because there are suitors waiting for that decision to see what they can do about Bottas. And I think it will distract Bottas from his goal, which is to be the number 2 driver, help Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship, and if he can, support Lewis Hamilton when he needs to. And I think that's the most important thing right now.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, so, I think people will be, some will be, that. I mean, it's an interesting situation because I feel with Bottas, if you let him know now, there could be a chance he's like, oh well, they're dropping me, so like, why should I give everything for the team if I'm not going to be part of this outfit anymore, and they're going to drop us. So, but and not telling him, it may well think that, oh, I might have a chance of getting the seat still, so I'll give everything for the team. So yeah, it'll be interesting when they announce it. I think they've made I think they've made the decision. I don't think they just announced it to the drivers or to the public yet. And I mean, it's an incredibly tough call, but I don't see the point in having Bottas there for 2022 in a brand new set of regulations just for a season. And like I said, then how many more? It's like you said, how many more races does George Russell need to prove that he's good enough? I mean, some people said he should have been in the seat this season after the Chequered Grand Prix, but I think Bottas has done well actually this season, to be honest. He's done well to sort of salvage points when Hamilton's been struggling at times. So he's played his part at times in some of the Grand Prix wins, such as Spain, the British Grand Prix as well. And so, yeah, he's done well this season in terms of supporting the team and helping the team. So it'd be interesting to see how he moves forward with that. I mean, obviously, there's different sort of teams coming in who want to come into the sport as well. I think there could be another American team on the grid. I don't know if you know too much about that in a minute. Where they're trying to look at maybe buying either the Williams outfit or the Alfa Romeo. I don't think they'll be looking at Williams. I think the Williams want to keep their name. I think that was part of the agreement when they sold it when Frank Williams sold it, is that they keep the name in the sport. But I think Alfa Romeo could be up for sale. But it's interesting. Or they might create their own team. You never know. So how would you see it?
Well, Alfa Romeo have secured their future with Sauber for the next few seasons, up to 2024, from what I'm aware. And Williams, as I said, I think they're going to be continue operating as they have been. I think keeping the Williams identity is the most important thing. So I don't see much changing there. In terms of new teams, yes, there have always been teams that have been touted around joining Formula One. I know Alpine and Renault have been talking to a few potential customer teams that want to try and enter a team into Formula One with them as engine suppliers. And, we've always heard rumors about Pantera. And they're a team that not a lot of people probably would have heard of, Pantera. They, similar to how the old Campos team used to be, they're a team that wants to get into Formula One, have looked at it, have claimed for the best part of 18 months that they're able to jump in, but there's always that 200 million shortfall that they'll have to pay into the sport to the other teams to get an entry. And that seems to be the real, stopping point for a lot of teams. That seems to be where a lot of these entries that whilst talked about, and this is also including the VW project teams as well, and Porsche and Audi, etc., that have been looking at the new engine regulations for 2025. It's the real stumbling block for a lot of them. So at the moment, I'm not expecting to see any new teams in the sport for a good number of years. So it's a shame because I think we need more teams on the grid, and I think it's important to have that because we have so much talent coming through that they just need seats available to them. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. As I said, 2022 is going to be a bit of a shake-up as well. In terms of Bottas's future, of course, you mentioned that he's kind of in a dilemma if he already knows, like, do I continue performing the way I have been to help Mercedes win the Constructors, or do I just don't care and just do what I like because I'm going anyway? In a way, Ferrari handled their removal of Kimi Räikkönen very poorly in 2018 when they told him that he was being replaced by Charles Leclerc literally hours after he secured pole position at the Italian Grand Prix. And that kind of derailed not only Ferrari's championship, but Sebastian Vettel's as well to a degree. And then, of course, a couple of years later, they did the same to Vettel. So Mercedes, I'm sure they're probably aware of this, but I just feel that Valtteri is more than professional and good enough to handle whatever he gets. And I think in a way, perhaps the reason we haven't heard this and perhaps why we might feel that a decision has already been made is perhaps Mercedes in the background are trying to, in Toto Wolff at least, trying to tie up Valtteri Bottas's future with another team. Possibly Williams. That would be my bet. And then once that's all tied up, that will be announced as a double announcement, if you like a trade, if you want. That's the sort of thing I'd expect Mercedes to do. So I'm not worried for them in this instance. And I think if Russell does get the nod, I don't think Valtteri is going to be driving worse. I think you're just going to see Valtteri do what Valtteri needs to do. And then if that's good enough, that's good enough for Mercedes. If not, then, congrats to Red Bull and we'll see Valtteri in a Williams or an Alfa Romeo, possibly.
Yeah, I feel with Mercedes, they'll judge this more carefully than what Ferrari did. I think Ferrari gave sort of Kimi Räikkönen no option to and other teams, so Raikkonen sort of had to hunt for himself for a team. It's kind of like how Racing Point dealt with Perez last season, and Perez has spent the whole season trying to find a slot, and luckily managed to find in Red Bull. So I feel with Mercedes, I honestly think it'll just be a trade-off. It'll honestly just be a direct swap where Bottas goes back to Williams, and you never know. Williams could be doing a madness next season and be up the grid because they've had more time in the wind tunnel or something. So because obviously with these new regulations, we don't know who's going to be at the front of the grid, right? We're all sitting here saying that, oh yeah, that we get George Russell in the Mercedes because he's going to be in the quicker car next season. But the actual factor is we don't know if it's going to be the quicker car in the next season. It could be in the middle. It could be at the back. I'm not saying that probably Haas is going to probably be the one dominating next season, but you never know. They could be at the midfield, and that's just how the regulations are next season. And it's exciting to see with the new regs. How excited are you for next season?
I think you have to be very excited for next season. I mean, the funny part is I think not a lot of people have been looking too far towards next season because of what we're getting this season. So far, we've had so many great races that I can't really think of one race this season that has really been underwhelming. Of course, we can talk about Styria and Austria for the battle at the front that obviously was won by Max quite easily. Very Hamilton-esque, if you like, of the past. But there was so much action going on in the midfield that you didn't really care for that too much, and neither did the race directors. They were just letting Max was still winning the race, and then showed him when he won the race. And that's never. I will just say though,
I will just say though, is that I think the one thing where I did wanted people to look at next season is that with the F1 sprint race that they had where they test, and obviously we're going to do another one in Monza, which might be a bit more easier for overtaking. But in Silverstone, you saw, and this is probably what led Lewis to go diving down the inside of Cox at turn one on that one in the Grand Prix. He knew that was going to be his only chance of getting at Max Verstappen for the rest of the Grand Prix. What he saw in the sprint race is he tried to overtake him, didn't get past, and that was it. Verstappen was gone. He couldn't catch up with him because he couldn't fight. Because of the downforce effect meant he couldn't get near him. So I think if he had this next season's car, there would have been more chances of him overtaking him. So I think for next season the sprint race would work, but not on this. I think they should have been trialing it. For me, they should have trialed it next season on next season's cars. It probably would have produced more effective results to look at.
Maybe. I mean, it's a good test to try it this season as well to a degree, because obviously these cars, as you said, naturally they're difficult to follow and overtake as a result. So it's not a bad indicator to see if it's going to work. I don't expect the sprint races to be on every single race. There's going to be a lot of races where you just won't be able to have sprint races, like Monaco. It just will be impossible. So I definitely think it's a good idea to feature. I don't think, upon reflection, the sprint race was as amazing as some people thought it was. I thought it was a bit better. I probably overrated it a little bit more than it was upon reflection.
I think though next season the Monaco Grand Prix might be a bit more action packed. I do actually think that.
It could be. As I said, I think with 2022 coming around, there's a lot of issues that it's obviously designed to address and mitigate a lack of action. I know DRS is still remaining in 2022. Obviously, the aim of it is to be removed altogether, so that we're not too reliant. So I think we're going to see a lot more overtakes next season as a result of the fact that we've got a lot less turbulent air affecting the car's downforce, let's say 10-15%, whatever it is that they're claiming, compared to the 55 that we currently deal with. And you've got DRS, which is going to be even more effective. So you're going to see a lot of overtaking. I think you're going to get to the point where people are going to start, hopefully people start complaining that DRS is creating too many artificial overtaking.
Yeah.
And they get rid of it. And obviously it delivers the result that we want. But it's a tough one with 2022. It's a lot of hope and a lot of expectation. But I think if I was advising fans on what they should be worrying about right now, enjoy this season. because we may not get a season like this season next season. People think that we're going to have 5-6 teams fighting for the championship. I know there's 4 in particular I think that are going to be fighting for the championship in Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, but you just don't know. And we could end up with one team, as Fernando Alonso said a couple of weeks ago, that absolutely smashes the new regulations, and they end up in turn could dominate Formula One for the next 3 or 4 years, which of course nobody wants. We want to see battles between 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 teams every single season. So we'll have to, let's put a pin in that one and let's enjoy the rest of this one, because this could prove to be one of the all-time best Formula One seasons we've ever had in the history of the sport, and I think we should be focusing more on that than next season.
Yeah, I understand that. I also, and it's like you said. I mean, it's just like they said. Every new regulations they say it's going to mitigate this. It's going to level the playing field, because we don't know how it's going to be next season, and Mercedes end up doing what they did with their power unit, and all of a sudden they're 3 seconds faster than everyone else. And that's the great thing. As much as they say we're mitigating the regulations so they can't get around it, they then find a way around it. That's the whole point of it. And people that don't understand it, that's what these designers do. They spend hours of their downtime finding loopholes, right, and developing loopholes, right? So that's why that's why it's like the pinnacle of motorsports. You've got the brightest minds trying to find the most innovative ways to make the car go faster and bend the rules. So it will be interesting, but I think, like with you said, this season is just, you just can't tell what can happen. You can try and predict from how people have performed from like seasons before, but in the end, it's more you're just gonna have to buckle up for each Grand Prix and just enjoy the ride while it's happening, because it could go either way. It could go easily so either way. I mean, everyone thought probably after Austria that was it. Is Verstappen now going to just storm to the title, because Mercedes did not like have an answer. All of a sudden, with maybe a little, they say it wasn't a big upgrade. I think it was a fairly decent upgrade, and that and some bad luck on Red Bull's side, and now the championship's completely turned around again. So, and this is the great seasons of F1 have always been the ones that have been up for one team and then down, then up, then down, then up, then downs. And then they all come together where they're on the same amount of points toward the end of the season, but they've been on such highs and in such lows that you don't know who's gonna turn out and win it. So, like I said, this is why I'm more interested about the F1 than I'm more interested about football right now. Right now.
Certainly a lot going on today. One, Mr. Cristiano Ronaldo coming back to his old stomping ground. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm an Arsenal fan, and obviously I want Arsenal to do really well. And obviously I think we kind of have to bide our time and hope for the best in the years to come. But I'm really excited to see Cristiano back in the Premier League, even if it is for Manchester United of all teams. But that should be fun.
Apparently it was going to be Man City last night. It's all just... but now it's all turned ahead, and it's now going to the other side of Manchester.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, that would have been hilarious if that happened. But
it would have been.
We're seeing some serious big hitters coming back to the Premier League. Obviously, Romelu Lukaku coming back, of course, to Chelsea. Ronaldo back at United.
Yeah, don't we know it?
Yeah, and it's one of those things with Arsenal. I don't think we have to worry about them too much. But not a Man City fan.
It's a Man City fan.
Yeah.
He was winding all the Man United fans up last night, so now he's now in the crap.
I mean, it's weird. If you're a Man City fan, I can understand the frustration. Obviously, thinking possibly getting Ronaldo and Harry Kane as well was another player that I think definitely wanted to go there. But the squad that City have, they've got a very, very strong team. Not to get too sidetracked, because obviously we're talking about Formula One, but I think, they're the champions for a reason. They've got one of the best coaches in world football in Pep Guardiola, and it's a strong team. It's a strong unit. And they're going to have a tough time this season. I think it's going to be a lot more interesting. They're not going to have it so easily. And I think Liverpool will be up there as well with United and Chelsea. So, yeah, I suppose we consider ourselves neutrals as far as the title race is concerned because we're not going to be involved in that. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that goes down.
We are going to be top of the table. We're going to be top of the bottom half.
Oh, I don't think it'd be that bad. I think we're probably going to be.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it'd be that bad. I think, as I said, we've had a lot of injuries, and it's a difficult start to the season. We didn't do ourselves any favors losing away at Brentford, but once we've got our players back in Partey and Ben White recovers from COVID and everything else, hopefully, and I say hopefully the team can get back to some level of form. But as I said, if someone offered me a European place, like a Europa League spot at the end of the season, I'd take it. We're not going to be in the top 4 this year. Let's not get too sidetracked, Steve. We're meant to be talking about.
I'm just gonna give you two cards that I've been writing down.
Here we go.
Yeah, I know you're not a Mikel Arteta fan, so
goodbye. I've got some F1 ones, by the way.
I'm sure you do. I mean, as far as Arsenal is concerned, I mean, there's a lot that does need to change, not just the manager. But anyway,
this one, Spinoda.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's Formula 1 related. But yes, look, let's go back to Formula 1.
Anyway, coming up to this Grand Prix, F1 is back. We're back at Spa. I mean, one of the all-time greats. I mean, obviously, it's 30 years on since Schumacher made his debut in F1, and I think there's going to be a lovely piece where Mick Schumacher gets to drive his Jordan, Jordan 191, I believe, that he drove for about 12 seconds before he had to park up with a clutch problem. I mean, your memories of Spa and like how much of a great Grand Prix this season, why people should watch this Grand Prix in particular.
Stephen, sorry to interrupt, but I do have to go prepare for my stream, so take care, guys.
Take care, mate. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, man. Goodbye.
So, Belgian Grand Prix holds a special place in my heart because it was the first race that I ever went to live back in 2001. And it was a really good weekend, actually, because obviously, Michael won for Ferrari on my actual birthday as well, which is pretty special. And England also beat Germany the night before, the famous 5-1 game in Munich, many, many, many years ago. So it was a pretty good weekend for me at the time.
Yeah, unfortunately, football didn't come home this week. Did it 30 years later, did it? No.
I mean, it didn't. But, the less we say about that, the better. We have to worry about that in Qatar next year. But
it's all right. We've got it covered. It's covered. Don't worry.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely coming home then. Of course it is. And if it's not then, it will come home in a couple more years. But Belgium is one of the best circuits on the calendar. It's one of the jewels in the F1 season. All the drivers have such fond memories and speak so highly of it. And it's a very unique challenge. High speed and downforce in the middle section, high speed again. And it's one of those old-fashioned circuits that definitely has the element of danger. I mean, of course, we saw earlier if anyone was watching the W Series qualifying, 6 drivers getting caught up in a big crash. Fortunately, they all seem to be okay, which is good. But
I'd have to rewatch that.
It was quite frightening, actually, considering what we've seen in the last couple of seasons. Of course, unfortunately, Antoine Hubert, of course, and Juan Manuel Carrera, of course, returning in F3 this season, which is great news for him as well, being involved in that. But, it's had its fair share of incredible moments in terms of racing. It's embedded in F1's history so richly.
Hakkinen Hakkinen was on Schumacher.
The greatest overtake at all time at the Camel Straight. Mika Hakkinen on Michael. Obviously, both of them lapping Ricardo Zonda, I believe it was, back in 2000. So, as I said, you just recall these moments in F1 history off the tip of your tongue as if they're happening yesterday. So, it's a brilliant circuit. I'd always advise to any F1 fan.
Hamilton and Raikkonen had about 3 laps left and it started raining.
Yeah, that's right. I remember, that was a very controversial incident as well, of course, with Lewis. But so that one, obviously, people still argue about that to this day over whether it should have been given a penalty or not.
Well, apparently they said it was all at the time. They said to him, they checked over the radio, to say if that's allowed, and they said it was perfectly allowed. And then after the race, they said it wasn't.
I mean, for me, upon reflection of that incident, I was of the opinion at the time that I thought Lewis, even though he did give the place back, he'd sort of half given it back because he'd been, he was sort of half like, as soon as Raikkonen goes, I'm going to go in and lunge in straight away. It was almost like you kind of need to let Kimi go a little bit, like for a corner into La Source, and then go after him, and then it would have been fine. But as I said, that was years and years and years ago, and obviously it's completely irrelevant now. But it's a circuit that's had so much F1 history, so many amazing memories, and it's a circuit I'd always advise to people, if you want to go to a track in the F1 calendar, go to Spa. It's a definite unique experience, and I think it's a circuit all F1 aficionados should go to at least once in their career. I'd certainly love to drive it one day. That would be a pretty special thing for me. And of course, embedded in
I think I might bottle it when I go up to Spa if I'm looking up in the sky and think I've got a shift left at some point. How they take that at full throttle. I think it's like you said when you retweeted that. I retweeted the clip, the helmet cam, which sees literally the eye level of the driver. So if anyone hasn't seen that cam, you've got to go see it, and I've retweeted it on my profile, so you can check it on my Twitter if you want to, or on Adam's, and you get to see what they see as they come up this steep hill of Eau Rouge before they then have to go down the Kemmel Straight, and it's quite frightening what they see, which is just sky, and there's no sort of reference point where they've got a shift left and then go down towards the Kemmel Straight. So I think at times you get I think like some people that I've met, they've said they get to walk the track. I'm not sure if that's true, but if you did, the first thing I would do if you were there is just go to Eau Rouge and just sit down, and then you'll get to see what they see. Because it's as close to the fall as you can get. So
it is quite a climb, obviously up to Eau Rouge and at the top of Radion as well. So yeah, it's definitely a unique experience. Of course, at the time, I didn't walk the track. I was only about 10 at the time, and I don't think they did the track walks like back in the like they do now. So it's definitely one to explore if you're ever able to get the opportunity to walk up at Spa. I definitely recommend it. It's about 7 kilometers, so it's a bit of a trek.
Yeah, it is a bit of a trek. It's not as much of a trek as the old circuit. Let's put it that way. Like the old circuit used to go back to past 2 villages and then back. So yeah, obviously it's a great thing to go see. Well, we've come to the end. We've come to the end of the show. Thanks, Adam, for coming on. As usual, really do appreciate you coming on. As always, go and just plug your channel for us.
Yeah, guys. So, like Stephen, I have my own show, of course, on YouTube at DNF1. On YouTube, we do a regular Formula One podcast where we talk about all the major news, gossip, and events in the Formula One world. And of course, we do some other videos as well relating to Formula One. I've got a few in mind that we're going to be releasing very, very soon. But of course, we'll have to wait and see what happens in the real world of Formula One to ensure that the timing is right for them as well. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And of course, you can follow us on social media. I've got my handle there, DNF1_official on Instagram and Twitter. So make sure to follow and say hi.
Yeah, make sure to do that. Make sure you go and subscribe there, because it's a really good place to, if you want to learn about like F1 and the world of Formula One. Great place to go and watch like podcasts and news and all your gossip as well. So I really do recommend it. So yeah, obviously as usual, you can find me here and doing my own F1 stuff as well as doing Arsenal and football content as well. This weekend we're not doing the Manchester City Arsenal watch along. We're doing a watch along to the qualifying. It's more entertaining. I don't really want to watch us getting battered, to be honest. But we will be doing a match reaction to it.
Probably be the second 6-0 we'll be involved in this week, but not necessarily how it went at West Brom.
Yeah, let's just put it that way. At least we scored some goals like during the West Brom game to actually have a goal in a month this month. So yeah, you can so make sure you go and check that out tomorrow. We're back in 15 minutes anyway for a preview of the F1 anyway, to preview the Grand Prix. And yeah, it's only gonna be a quick preview for about half an hour, but yeah, we'll be back in 15 minutes for that. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Make sure to smash the share button. Make sure you share the content to everyone, and make sure you do join a membership from as little as $1.99. It goes towards a terrific cause, as it says down below, Children's Liver Disease Foundation. So yeah, until then, we're back at 7:15, and then the watch-alongs are starting tomorrow for the Grand Prix. Until then, everyone stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Take care.